Welcome back, fellow astrologers, to another video in the Astrology Keyring Fundamental series. In this video, G2, we will be discussing what is a birth chart. In the previous video, G1, we talked about how to actually computate a birth chart by using some freeware known as Astro123, and we went over how we came about crafting this particular birth chart right here. But in this video, we're going to actually talk about the actual interpretation. What are all the parts of a birth chart and why it's important? And what are the important parts of the chart and why? We'll go ahead and read from the paragraph, then we'll go over the anatomy and then show how it connects on the chart. Then we'll go over to Google and do a brief reading to see what a birth chart is. And we'll finish off by reading the final paragraph and summing up. A birth chart or natal chart is a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment and location of your birth. It records the positions of the sun, moon, planets, and other key points like the ascendant, midheaven, in the zodiac signs and houses. This acts as your cosmic blueprint, a symbolic map of your personality, drives, habits, soul contracts, and life path. Each chart is entirely unique, even amongst twins, due to the ever-changing position of celestial bodies. Interpreting a birth chart helps you understand your natural strengths, emotional patterns, life lessons, and the kind of energies you attract or resist throughout life. So, doing a birth chart is what separates real astrology from a horoscope. Almost everybody knows a horoscope and can tell you what their sun sign is. In this case, the sun sign is Leo for Dad here. But if all we ever did was just look at your sun sign, then that would only give you 12 different options, and it's kind of narrow. And everybody knows that there's always some things about them that aren't just their sun sign, and there's a lot more to it, which is one of the reasons why people are so quick to debunk astrology, because they don't take the time to look at what all the rest of this is. One of the first big steps most people take into astrology is learning their big three, which we refer to as the luminaries, the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. These three items are a huge telltale about a person's id, ego, and superego when it comes to archetypical personality traits. If you only limited yourself to just the sun sign, that would only give you 12 options. But when you add these two in as well, it gives you 1,728 other possible combinations just in these three alone. Let alone if you add the 5 traditional planets or the 3 generational planets, or if you had the 5 points of interest that we talked about in the D series for planets. Now, when we get into the anatomy of birth chart, we have 4 bullet points that make up a majority of the interpretation of a birth chart. The 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 archetypes that are foundational to astrology, which are right here, these little red symbols here, as you see along the circle here and on the outer part of the circle. These right here are the signs of the planets. Right here, it talks to the planets. Each planet represents the force of an archetype, i.e. Mars and Venus, which are these. The blue symbols here are all the planets. They talk about certain aspects of you. The planets each represents a force of the archetype, i.e. Mars, action, Venus, love. So like in this case, Mars in Aries, Mars an action planet. It is your projecting part. Venus is receptive part. Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, all these are your traditional planets, and they all have different aspects. This is limitation. This is expansion. They all have different aspects of your life that they have archetypical traits that pop out and show more about your personality. When you get into the 12 houses, areas of life like career, relationships, home, and identity, you're talking about these areas here. These 12 houses also have signs. You see right here. These are the signs right here of the actual houses, and each house represents an area of your life where one of these planets can be flavoring things with the sign. They tell a little bit more of a snapshot of who you are. That also sets the beginning. Your ascendant sets off everything right here that connects all of your houses together. If you don't have an accurate birth time, you won't have an accurate ascendant. The ascendant will be in a completely different sign every 2 hours. That's why when we said earlier, even in twins, you could have a completely different chart, because when twins are born far enough apart, their houses will be completely different, and even their ascendant may be completely different. The degrees that all those go off have different effects, which sets that little slight difference between both of you, or anyone for that matter. And finally, there's the aspects, the angles planets form with one another, revealing internal dynamics. And these are the aspects. If you look right here, you'll see that some of these things, like for instance, Pluto, right here makes a square to Saturn. That could create some kind of tension between Pluto and Saturn. Same time, Pluto is trine to Jupiter, which could be a very positive aspects. Trines and sextiles, these green colored ones, are positive aspects, and squares and oppositions like these are negative aspects. Now, conjunct ones like these two can possibly be good or bad. It just depends on the planets that are involved. And as we get more into interpretation, when we do in the CD series, we'll start doing the planets in their signs. So you'll see more about that. Later on, we'll move on to the DE series, where we're actually talking about the planets through each of the houses. And finally, when we get to the DF series, we'll look at how all the planets make aspects to each other and sum up the chart. The DE series will be our intermediate, and the DF will be our advanced series. When we move on past the fundamentals, we'll actually take these and apply them practically to charts so you can see how they work and how they interact with one another. And just a reminder to everyone, anytime you see any of these blue highlighted links, you can actually go to Google searches when you follow the words to any of these different topics where it talks about what those things are, or you can go to the letter and number where we actually do the video where we go over it in the fundamental series, and you can see what we had to say about each one of those different topics, including this, where you can go to G2 and see this video we're doing right now. But on that note, let's look here at what is a birth chart in Google. Right away, they tell you a birth chart, also known as a natal chart. It is known as a natal chart. They're both the same thing. You ever hear somebody say a natal chart or birth chart? It's all the same thing. Okay, a natal chart is a map of the planet's position at the exact moment, day, and location of your birth. It is a tool used in Western astrology to gain insight into a person's strengths, weaknesses, and potential life path. The chart is divided into 12 houses representing different areas of life, and including the position of the 12 zodiac signs and the sun, moon, and other planets. That's a pretty simple breakdown, similar to what we said earlier. It does go down here to break it down a little bit more about talking about the houses, the signs, the planets. It brings up the ascendant too, how it connects to the houses, and the aspects that it makes. It goes into more detail, and you can always go into deeper dive. Remember, every time you click on any one of our links, it'll always be a little bit different, so you probably won't see the same thing when you come back to Google. So I typically like doing a reading or two. I'll just do one quick reading from one of these guys. Let's see. You know what, right here, this says right here, what is a birth chart? Let's see what they have to say. What is a birth chart? Here on Chani. Okay, let's scroll down here and see what it has to say. Your birth chart is a two-dimensional map of what the sky looked like from the precise moment and location of your birth. However, to most, a birth chart is a chaotic jumble of esoteric symbols, glyphs, and lines. That's true. When you first start out, that's basically what it looks like. It is quite simply overwhelming. It has its own language, and like any language or map, it takes time, energy, and patience to decode it. This is very true. Very true. That's part of what we're trying to do here, is teach you how to sort through the chaos and figure out more about it. It goes on to say, just like a map offers you roads and mountains, your birth chart gives you an idea of the map to life's purpose. It's a blueprint of your own heroic mission and how to live it out. Let's see, it goes on to talk about the importance of the time itself, because from our vantage point, it's always on the move. The sky looks different from minute to minute, which is true. It's why we mentioned earlier when we were talking about twins. You could be born 2 hours apart and have a completely different set of houses and ascendant, which is why it's important to know that if you want to get more of those details when you're actually doing your own birth chart, or somebody you know for sure what their birth time is. Now, it's not always important if you want some general information, because a lot of times the planets are going to stay right around the same place regardless of what time of day, except for like the moon. Moon moves kind of quick. It might change signs in a day, not always, but still it'll give you a rough idea. It's also important to know where you're born, because depending on where you're born will tell where the sun rises. So it can be very dependent on your location. And that's a very important also part of knowing your chart, is where and when you're born. And it goes on to talk about where your chart is where the meeting point of everything was at the moment you were born. It does have some more cool information, gets into what some of these basic meanings are. It looks like it has a fun little deeper dive into what the breakdown is of all the little bits and pieces are. But let's go back. That was a good little touch. I'm not going to go into a bunch of other pages because they're probably going to tell you a lot of the similar stuff. But let's go ahead and read this paragraph right here. Together, these elements create a rich symbolic system reflecting your inner world, psychological drive, and spiritual path. The birth chart is the foundation of all Western astrology. Everything else, transits, synastry, and progressions, build from this original print. So in future series, we'll be going through, like I mentioned earlier, in basic charts, what the signs are in their planets. Intermediate charts, we'll talk about the planets through the houses. And when we get advanced, we'll talk about the planets' aspects to each other as we go through the entire Intro to Astrology learning birth charts. Eventually, when we move up to a higher tier and we do the intermediate astrology, we'll get into transits and synastry. Because in transits and synastry, you're starting to take what you learned from the basic birth chart and applying it to other aspects of astrology. Everything starts out with the birth chart, and from there it expands. When you do a synastry chart, which we'll talk about in G3, synastry, you actually compare two birth charts together, where you see the compatibility between the two charts. You'll find out where you harmonize and where you have discordance. You'll find out people that might be good for you in life, people that might cause problems. And when you get on later on to transits, we'll talk about how the planets are affecting you right now. You'll look at what the planets are right now as opposed to what aspects they're making to your actual birth chart, and it'll tell you about some of the mishaps or the opportunities that pop up. Historically, people have used astrology to plan their future, to achieve their goals, and to set things so that they can have the proper timing to capitalize on good opportunities and to also avoid mishaps. So one of the reasons why we say astrology helps empower yourself. Some people say, well, I don't have some predestined thing that's going to happen to me. I don't believe in predestiny. I believe in free will. Well, in this case, astrology is only going to show you what the universe is going to throw at you. You always have the free will to take an opportunity when it presents itself, or to try to avoid any mishap when it shows up. If you know what they are ahead of time, it gives you the opportunity to put more of your free will on your situation. So the more you learn to master astrology, the more you can learn to master your opportunities and avoid the negativities in life. It can give you more hope. It can help you find people that are good to be around. It can help you identify toxic environments or toxic people or the right kind of people to be around. There's a wealth of knowledge to be had by learning to master it. And it all starts out with understanding what a birth chart is. Which that's pretty much sums up what a birth chart is. And later on in G3 and G4, we'll be talking about synastry and transits. So stay tuned for the next two videos where we'll break into that a little bit more. We hope you have enjoyed this video from our Astrology Keyring series. If you like the content, please like, follow, and share with your friends. Thank you for watching and have a blessed journey.